Octopath Traveler, an RPG surrounding the journeys of 8 travelers, known for its distinct retro-inspired art style. This game can look pretty traditional at first glance, but Octopath Traveler has more novel concepts than you might expect. This is an unassumingly ambitious game, and while some of these new ideas may create new weaknesses in turn, Octopath's dedication to player freedom comes with a lot of benefits. Of course, deviating from beloved genre staples isn't going to please everyone, so if you're looking for more of the usual things that come with a traditional RPG experience, you might be left feeling a little wanting by the end of this one. In this video, I'm going to lay out what I found to be the best and the worst aspects of this game. Be warned that full spoilers for Octopath Traveler are on the table. The best. Number 1, the HD 2D aesthetic. This is a very nice game to look at, blending sprites and colors for a lively world with vibrant environments. Nearly every screen gives you reason to pause and take in the setting. Places like Whispermill's Twilight Fields or the Frostland's nighttime snowfalls have an excellent sense of atmosphere, and most towns have their own personality. It's nice to just exist in this world. It's just such a charming style, and that even extends to the NPC sprite work. Despite each character's simplicity, they look distinct, and the 8 playable travelers even have 12 different in-battle looks for each job combination. Unappreciated detail that's perfect for the role-playing focus. Enemies, while static, have brilliantly executed sprite work. The bosses in particular can look incredibly gnarly, thanks to their size and expressiveness. Battle environments themselves also have a nice depth to them. This is a classy presentation that commands attention, making fantastic use of simple components for stunning results. Number 2, the soundtrack. This is one of my favorite video game soundtracks. I'm not usually impressed with orchestrated libraries, but Octopath Traveler has an enormous variety of beautiful and intense pieces to perfectly accompany every moment. This is an exceptional collection of compositions for energy and emotion. Moving's the best way to describe them. While a lot of these tracks do have short loops, you rarely spend so long with them that it becomes a problem. Towns, dungeons, overworld areas, loads of pieces that grab your attention. Battle themes in particular are invigorating, especially the ones saved for boss fights. I even like this game's main theme, which isn't a common thing for me. This is a phenomenal selection of orchestrated music that really packs a punch, and it's easily one of Octopath Traveler's best qualities. Number 3, a commitment to freedom. Making your own choices, discovering the world at your own pace, and crafting the adventure of your choosing are huge strengths here. Despite Octopath Traveler's somewhat nostalgic presentation, it's actually pretty forward-thinking in its structural design and what it's okay with players getting away with. You choose which traveler to start with, who you even want to add to the party, which chapters to engage with, and when you engage with them. There's loads of customization when it comes to battle roles, thanks to all the sub-jobs and skills for tons of personalization. And what's best is that it's up to you what you want to bother with. Never will you be thrust into a story when you don't want to be. Path actions open up a lot of possibilities. They're a great concept for a role-playing game, letting you interact with the world in a unique role-playing way. Functionally, they're very simple, but they let you do things you can't usually do in your average RPG. You can one-on-one battle just about anyone, purchase their items, or steal from them, or even recruit them to be summoned during battle, each with their own abilities. There's a simple logic to how path actions work that makes solving problems satisfying. Side quests in general are brief and straightforward. Most of them can even be completed in multiple ways, with very varying outcomes depending on how you go about it. The fact that there's a decision on how to resolve them, however minor, helps them feel a bit more meaningful. Despite the many benefits that come with such a free design philosophy, one of the most common complaints I've seen for Octopath Traveler is that each story is self-contained, and the travelers don't interact like your typical RPG party. Outside of optional banters, they basically don't interact at all, and while this does come with some narrative inconsistencies I'll get into more later, I'm perfectly happy with the game being designed this way, because it wouldn't be able to have the freedom it does otherwise. Abandoning the traditional party narrative benefits this game's greatest fundamental strength. Does this really need to be another RPG about a group of misfits on a world-saving adventure? Could these characters have been worked into each other's stories, even if they're not about saving the world? Probably, but it would have been incredibly difficult to do while maintaining this game's freedom to craft your own party and progression. I'm honestly really grateful this isn't another dime a dozen party dynamic where half the characters are irrelevant. Octopath forgoes that format to focus on characters with their own stories and motivations, letting them each have the same level of presence in the game. I'm happy to take that over another quest to save the world. To be fair, there is a post-game quest that does go down that path, but it doesn't interfere much with their individual stories. It's actually pretty clever how it connects them together. Octopath Traveler rarely holds your hand. The flexible progression does a great job keeping you engaged, so you're free to craft your own adventure. Number 4, narrative drive. Stories are one of the biggest draws of the RPG genre, so it's unfortunate that they rarely impress me in their over-reliance on cliches, like doomsday scenarios or chosen one quests. While I think these ideas can be done well, a lot of the time they feel like a phoned-in excuse for an adventure, making it difficult to care about anything going on. You don't need to take things to a world-saving level to have stakes. I've come to prefer more grounded stories that, most importantly, are driven by the character's own desires. Octopath Traveler's not exempt from cliches, or from getting pretty out there, but it's a nice change to follow people who are on a journey for their own personal reasons. It's just more relatable to me. Each of these characters are likable in their own way, and easy to understand. It's nice to play as competent characters, and even if their stories rarely stick the landing, at least most of them are intriguing. It's rewarding to watch the cast grow through their experiences, and work towards something that matters to them. Granted, not all of these stories are focused on personal growth, but how each traveler relates to others is often interesting, and sometimes things go in unexpected directions, for better or worse. Princesses and kings are just other characters in this world. They're not special or really even a focus. Travel banters are an appreciated inclusion for fleshing out the cast a bit, showing them share their perspectives on each other's situation. It gives them some semblance of a dynamic, and since they're removed from the actual stories, those can remain focused on what's most relevant. I just wanted to call out this aspect of Octopath's storytelling in particular, because it does a much better job at grabbing and keeping my attention than a lot of what's out there. That's absolutely not to say the storytelling's without flaws, but believe me, we'll get there. Number 5, combat design. Octopath's combat is remarkably accessible and satisfying. This is your usual turn-based system, but several changes enhance the simple formula for something more strategic, empowering, and, wouldn't you know it, freeing. RNG's fairly minimal to start, at least compared to a lot of the genre's contemporaries. Moves almost always do what they say they're going to do. Even most status effects work on bosses. The minimal RNG gives the player confidence in their decision-making, so they can plan and pull off strategies consistently, often with astounding results. Nearly everything in combat's presented to you at face value, so it's really up to the player how difficult fights end up being. Bosses feel like events, and they can either be a nightmare or a complete joke depending on the strategy. You just gotta use the tools at your disposal. Skills have very clear effects, so it's easy to combine them knowing how they'll work with each other ahead of time. It's a well-balanced selection of abilities. Showing when each character's going to act is a huge part of the combat system's success. You can plan sufficiently when you know the order everyone will act in, which makes working with an inconsistent turn order so much more enjoyable. The boost system's a very essential element, letting you power up your moves with a lot of flexibility. It's a really great system. The simple fundamentals of this combat system not only make you feel smart, but they're fun to work with. Unlocking new jobs and skills unlocks more pieces to play around with, giving you more options options, so strategies are constantly evolving. The secret job bosses in particular are challenging tests of how well you've learned to take advantage of your options, and they're rewarding to beat in their own right by opening up even more possibilities, at a time when it's reasonable to think you're past game-changing unlocks. Octopath Traveler knows it's satisfying to play by presenting problems up front and making it clear what you can do to mitigate them. It doesn't feel cheap like some other RPGs that overly rely on RNG to present a challenge. Octopath lets you take control of battle thanks to clear rules and confident decision-making for enjoyable and rewarding victories. Number 6, a spread of nice qualities. I'm just gonna list these off. The job point system's a fairly standard skill learning format, but the nice thing about it is, outside of divine skills, you're not limited to learning skills in any order. You can learn them as you choose for acute character customization. This also means most skills remain useful since they're treated with equal value. It's nice when early skills aren't invalidated later on, and while you'll certainly get better options, most skills are usable the whole way through. Like skills, equipment has clear effects and benefits. It's nice to come across new weapons and armor, as they often have useful stat increases and effects. Managing equipment's surprisingly easy for 8 characters. Menus are user-friendly and well laid out, and everything's very snappy. Tutorials, while brief, are visually informative, and are rarely ever forced on you. Fast travel's effortless to make use of, and is almost always available right in the menu. Save points are abundant and considerately placed before boss fights. Auto-saving also happens frequently. NPCs graciously have indicators placed above them, so you can quickly check whether or not they have information you've yet to read or items you've yet to snag, which encourages being thorough. Inns and taverns are conveniently placed for the most part, often near the exits of towns, making it quick to make use of them. Getting in and out of battles also really fast. This game does not waste time on end battle screens and fanfares. Experience and items are shown almost instantly, and combat itself only takes as long as it takes you to make decisions, since animations are never drawn out. It's all very considerate to keeping you engaged. A few other things: status effects automatically dissipate after battle. Leveling up fully heals the relevant character, and switching jobs doesn't cost anything, and can be done anywhere. But to be fair, this does have some clunky elements to it that I'll get into more soon. That was a lot to get through. It's no secret I think Octopath Traveler does a lot well, but I've suggested a few times that it's not without hang-ups. It has a few questionable design choices, and we certainly can't forget the narrative woes, which, despite some of my praises, might be Octopath's greatest weakness. I hope you've enjoyed my absolute gushing up to this point, because we're gonna shift gears as I break down the most critical failures of this otherwise impressive game. The worst. Number 1, locking the starting traveler. Perhaps my biggest issue with the game, outside of its storytelling weaknesses, is the choice to lock your starting traveler in the party until their story's completed. This means whoever you choose to play first can't be removed from the party for nearly the entire game if you're balancing story progression evenly. I assume this was done to give some sense of weight to your decision, not that you'd know this the first time playing, and perhaps to place you more in the position of your initial traveler, but I really see no benefit to this restriction. It can even feel punishing if your starting traveler doesn't have one of the more essential path actions or battle abilities. Therion is arguably the most useful character to always have in your party. Purple chests, which are abundant, can only be opened by him. Not the best decision, since nearly every dungeon has at least one. So if he's not with you already, you'll have to backtrack to a tavern if you want to open them up, and they almost always have better loot than standard chests. Being able to steal on the fly from NPCs and bosses is also a nice thing to always have available. But first-time players won't know Therion's value as a lead going in, and can easily wind up locked into another less useful traveler, when you're probably going to want him in the party anyway. Since you can take the starting traveler out of the party after completing their story anyway, I really don't understand the decision to lock them in when it it only takes away from the freedom this game's otherwise so committed to. Number 2, inconveniences and nitpicks. Before we get into the stories, I want to call out a few other less than stellar design choices. The most notable being how to teach characters support skills from other jobs, an annoying and convoluted process. To do this, you first have to unequip the job that gives the support skill from someone else using it, swap to the new one, learn skills until you unlock the support skill you want, then swap both characters back to their original jobs. On top of this, when characters lose access to a weapon type while changing jobs, they'll automatically unequip the weapon they had, forcing you to re-equip both characters with the weapons they may have dropped when they swapped. The job class you want to switch to might also be on a character not in the active party, so you'll have to go to a tavern to add them to the party before you can unequip their job, and this is all just for one character. It's a very laborious process just to teach a support skill, especially if you're trying to do it on the fly. Ideally, you wouldn't have to equip a job to a character to learn those skills. It'd save a lot of menu usage and streamline the process a great deal. As for some other complaints, enemy weaknesses don't always follow much logical sense. Frostbear, for example, isn't weak to fire, a fluffy ice bear of all things, so discerning weaknesses can sometimes feel random and lead to a lot of guessing. Standard enemies are mostly generic concepts: bats, crabs, elemental masses. Aside from Kate's, few of them stand out and leave a lasting impression, but at least the boss designs make up for them. The final post-game area, the Gate of Finis, doesn't have any save points, despite asking you to defeat 8 remixed boss battles before facing the real threat, Galdera. These fights are very simple when you know how to handle them, but I'm not sure I understand why they lock you into this area in the first place, especially since Galdera is a tremendous step up in difficulty and can easily catch you off guard, wiping you out in a blink while also asking you to refight those 8 bosses over again. It's an off-putting design choice that can turn players away right on the verge of closure. Finally, look at this bird flying into the building. Lazy. Number 3, storytelling woes. Let's get the basics out of the way first. Dialogue can be fairly uninspired, and while the voice acting's mostly solid, it can get hokey, like you're watching a bad stage play. Line reads can feel very unnatural, with strange embellishments.
Well, did you come all this way just to entertain me? If so, congratulations on a job well done.
The main cast all does well enough, but Ulbricht's breathy way of speaking annoys me to no end, and sounds like someone trying to do a voice they're not suited to. With that said, more scenes would have benefited from voice acting in general. The final post-game side quest in particular feels inappropriately silent. The group's existence as a party's sometimes at odds with the plot. Supposedly, the characters are together throughout their exploits, and yet Primrose is still ambushed and stabbed in a small room, and Ophelia's locked up in prison by random villagers, as though she's not constantly in the presence of 7 other people and a big cat. I ultimately don't mind too much, since I think these stories work better staying self-contained, but there's a dissonance in these moments that's hard to deny, and makes your party feel more like they're viewing each other's adventures, not participating in them. Therion being a part of this group, when his entire story is about how he struggles to trust others, is also hard to buy. Not to mention he's a thief, which certainly clashes with other party member priorities. I also have no idea why party banters, which show multiple characters talking, are reserved for endgame, after you start completing chapter 4s. If these were spread throughout the game, you'd probably get a better sense of the group's dynamic during the journey, but for whatever reason, they're relegated to the end. In any case, let's delve into some bigger problems. As much as I appreciate the character-driven nature of Octopath's storytelling, unfortunately, most of the stories deteriorate in their later chapters, failing to come together as smoothly as one would hope. The writers seem to struggle with weaving in antagonists naturally in particular, but this leads me to the issue with villain characterization in Octopath overall. Villains in the Octopath world are ludicrously egocentric and completely completely irredeemable. They're one-note assholes with almost no depth, and while this does motivate the player to want to take them down, you're not given much chance to feel otherwise, because there's no nuance to them. Perhaps I'm underselling just how cartoonishly evil these antagonists are, thanks in part to their over-the-top line deliveries and reprehensible actions, which stand out all the more when they're twist villains who throw out their prior characters. I know it's not impossible for people to be this way in real life, but the amount of them that devolve into this by the end's just too much.
If you won't work for me, I'll just find another way to make money off of you.
The brat wouldn't shut up, so I stuck him one to give him something to really cry about.
A sword to protect the weak. Look at this point, fool. It was made for killing. That's how I got to where I am today. I used you to get what I wanted, and now I own this whole town. Show me the darkest shadow in your heart. You hate this, don't you? You are full of regrets!
Vanessa is a good example of a missed opportunity. An apothecary intentionally poisoning her patients so she can sell them an antidote at a premium was a chance to show a character who lost their way to get by in the world, and maybe doesn't feel great about what she's doing. No, there's no nuance to this. She relishes in the deception and loves her money and doesn't care about the pain she causes. Maybe she could have felt some remorse for what she's doing, or really needed the money. Alphen could teach her about the proper priorities of the profession? No. I'm evil. I cackle in my lair about my deeds. Because that's more of a twist, I guess, and gives you a boss fight too. Miguel, a murderer who Alphen heals, who promises to do good from now on, of course immediately kidnaps and injures a child the instant he's out of his sickbed. Villains who will gleefully kill a young girl held hostage when they fail to get what they want, and have nothing to gain. They're just completely hopeless. The writers seem a bit addicted to twist villains in particular, despite the fact that most are easy to see coming. Nowhere is this more apparent than with Simeon, which brings me to number 8, Primrose's story. Even though Primrose's chapter 1's frequently celebrated as the best of the 8 openers, man does her story fall far. There's no doubt in my mind this is the weakest of the 8 Traveler stories overall. While her first chapter is a great start, setting up her motives in a compelling way, Chapter 2's already a step down with just how oversimplified it is, but at least it continues her revenge plot in a sensible way. Chapter 3 is where things really nosedive with the introduction of Simeon, a childhood friend of hers who appears out of nowhere and is all of a sudden an important, loving figure of her past, though he's never even been alluded to before now. He's especially caring and warm towards Primrose, of course to make her story all the more tragic when it turns out he's the mastermind controlling the evil organization who killed her father. This game's no stranger to writing contrivances, but this one character is so insanely forced into her story for the sake of a villainous twist. A seemingly perfect, loving guy just materializes for the biggest heel turn possible into a psychotic madman. He only exists for the sake of tearing down Primrose further, and fabricating a tragedy so it's all even more melodramatic. If he was properly integrated and set up earlier, he would have felt a bit more natural, but don't introduce him in the same chapter he's revealed to be the mastermind in. I guess the writers didn't think her story had enough going on as a straightforward revenge plot, but this addition muddles the message, and makes it all very hard to buy. Chapter 4, believe it or not, goes even further off the rails, seeing Primrose confront Simeon at a theater showing a play of her life being acted out. Information we've already been beaten over the head with through flashbacks. It's ridiculous how excessive this is at belaboring the same points. The story just has nothing left to say, but continues to unload a relentless amount of melodramatic dialogue. Like, we get it already. She believed in her dad's values and lived a miserable life to avenge him. Her story's not so deep as to ask for this level of reiteration, and it's a complete pace killer. I wanted her to show up up and obliterate this guy. Instead, she lets him call the shots and say what he wants, and his words even manage to get to her. Her inability to stay calm during their confrontation makes her look easily manipulated and far less clever than how she first presents. Primrose's Chapter 4 is the biggest slog in the whole game. It's a drawn-out, redundant ending that just feels messy. This isn't the only disappointing story here, though, so we're going to continue by ranking the other 7 Traveler stories, from worst to best. So, if Primrose is number 8, who's number 7? And the second worst story in the game? Number 7, Ophelia's story. Another one that suffers from a tossed-in antagonist, this time named Matthias, an over-the-top maniac and another shallow twist. Compared to Simeon, this guy at least shows up in her first chapter, but it's such a minor scene you'd be forgiven to forget him entirely by the time he's relevant later. He's distractingly given screen time while barely having any agency in the story, so it's easy to see something's up with this guy. He's far from the only problem here, though. Ophelia herself might be the most uncompelling traveler of the lot. Her personality can be summed up as compassionate and dedicated. That's it. She doesn't undergo any kind of growth throughout her story, and struggles to feel like a real person. Her whole quest is spent scrambling to help others in need, including her sister Liana, not the most likable person, who drugs Ophelia to steal her ember so she can resurrect their recently deceased father. It's all a bit much, and a ludicrous path for Liana to go down, making her look impossibly stupid. But I suppose in grief, people can be open to anything. I actually like her second chapter the most, because it at least shows an endearing relationship between some kids. The only thing in her story to make me feel anything. As much as it wants you to care about her relationship with her foster family, it just doesn't feel genuine. Ophelia's overall story isn't cohesive or interesting. The cleric angle's also kind of wasted. She's really just a delivery service for the Order. By the end, it's hard to see any kind of message that was trying to be told here. It's a dull journey that struggles to resonate. Number 6, H'aanit's story. H'aanit's certainly the most basic of the 8. While I appreciate her story for being different, abandoning a lot of the melodrama and self-discovery narratives the others are packed with, there's also not much to get attached to when reduced to this degree. H'aanit's a hunter on a mission to hunt, track down the beast, save Master, and that's pretty much it. Most of her cutscenes are business, finding out where to go and what to do to finish her mission. There aren't a lot of profound moments in this one, so very little of it's memorable. Like Ophelia, H'aanit also doesn't really grow, not mentally or emotionally in any case. But she does take down a dragon, which is kind of treated as an important accomplishment. Hunting apparently boils down to finding where the mark is, going there, and defeating it. It's really no more intricate than that. Her master Zonta's probably the most entertaining thing here. He's actually fun. A stark contrast to H'aanit, who's exceptionally dry and serious. Both her and her story just aren't very interesting. It's a straightforward quest about saving her master and hunting down Red-Eye, who I will give it up for since it has a totally rad design. Still, there's just not much to latch onto in this one, and her chapters all feel the same. It's a journey following an underwhelming and somewhat underdeveloped character. A shame too, because there was so much potential with this one. Number 5, Tressa's story. Often considered one of, if not the weakest story in Octopath Traveler, Tressa's pretty different from the rest of the crew, with a fairly low-stakes journey. It's a lot lighter than most other stories, and while I do value it for that, it's not the most compelling, and can feel unnecessarily dragged out. This is another case of please just make your point and move on, especially in her 4th chapter when she's ranting about the importance of her journal, to an annoying degree. Her 4th chapter stands out in particular for how lackluster it is as a finale. Her final antagonist's thrown in at the last minute and isn't even voiced. Tressa's earlier chapters are okay. The 3rd one's pretty boring, but at least her enthusiasm's likable. The most rewarding thing about her story is her blossoming relationship with the rival merchant Ali. By the end, it's heartwarming to see them as friends and look out for each other, despite their rough start. Overall though, this is a pulseless story that lasts longer than it needs to, with a lot of corny dialogue. It's easy to see why many think it's the worst, but it at least doesn't set expectations that it fails to pay off. Number 4, Ulbricht's story. I don't love Ulbricht's character. He's just no fun whatsoever, and his personality's very limited. That said, his narrative's fairly well done. While this searching for a purpose story isn't very original, his chapter 3 goes in an unexpected direction that really lifts it up. Earhart, the man responsible for his kingdom's fall, shows a depth of character rare for an antagonist in this game. He's not much of an antagonist at all, in fact, showing it's possible for these writers to create morally gray characters, and he stands out for that. It's nice to see the two reconcile their past and move on from it. This would have been a fine ending for Ulbricht's story if it was the last chapter, but there's still a fourth part to go, and that's where the story falters. This chapter feels disconnected from everything before it, and Ulbricht's character growth's basically finished at this point, so it just feels unnecessary. Truthfully, Ulbricht's story would probably rank higher if I liked the character more, but he's just really uninteresting. His swordsmanship and desire to find purpose is his whole character. Even his banters are forgettable and often make the same point. He's a proud warrior with integrity, awareness, and good judge of character. That's it. Even with all that considered, he still has one of the more competent stories. Number 3, Cyrus's story. This one's nice for having almost no internal conflict or struggle. Cyrus knows who he is and what matters to him, and while he does question what the best use is for a dangerous book, it doesn't take long for him to double down on his passion and values in teaching others. He's personable, with an endearing earnestness in all that he does, so it's entertaining to watch him play off others. His plot's not especially deep. It's a simple journey about tracking down a book and unraveling the truth behind its disappearance. His fourth chapter's conceptually undercooked, and some moments are a bit silly in just how contrived they are, but it all works well enough. With that said, this is another story without much to get attached to, and I think that comes down to just how impersonal a lot of it feels. Cyrus loves a good mystery, but because it's framed that way, it's more like you're playing through an episode of a detective show without much heart. This is still one of the more enjoyable stories in figuring out exactly what's going on, and for just how likable Cyrus is, but it's unlikely to move you. Number 2, Therion's story. Likable characters, meaningful conversations and growth, a properly built-up villain for the finale. Therion's story's not perfect, but it offers an inspired setup and nicely paced character moments. As a snarky thief, Therion's effortlessly charming, and while not all of his chapters use their time wisely, it's a compelling journey to be a part of as you learn about Therion's emotional struggles, of course culminating in a direct confrontation with them. Darius is properly built up and introduced from the start. You slowly learn more about their history together until Darius is a part of what's going on now, so it flows very well and feels complete. It's also fun to just play the role of a thief and watch Therion's relationships develop as he continues his quest, giving you something worthwhile to take away from it. I don't have much more to say about this one. It's a focused story with a nice cast of characters, believable progression, and consistent themes, easily making this the second best character story overall, second only to number 1, Alfin's story. Is this a controversial number 1? Alfin's stories easily compared to Tressa's, since they're both focused on understanding oneself through their profession and interactions with others. They also have the most open-ended goals to their journeys. As you can see by the ranking though, this one clearly does the concept better. Alfin's a kind person with admirable goals of healing others. Aside from his first chapter, which is a little basic, his chapters are all well executed, and present interesting confrontations with morality and the responsibility that comes with his job, which can sometimes lead to unexpected consequences. The conflict Alfin goes through in his own heart's presented very naturally, culminating in a chapter 4 that's entirely focused on it, and it's refreshing to see one of these stories not feel the need to end with some kind of evil madman that needs to be stopped. Alfin's interactions with Ogun in particular are great for how they cause him to reflect on his own beliefs, ultimately helping him follow his own truth. It's a very pleasant story without any weak chapters, and an easy to root for lead in Alfin, showing you what his passion means to him. This is for sure my pick for the best character story in Octopath Traveler. And that finally does it for everything I have to say about this enormous game. I've seen some Octopath players lose steam around the Chapter 4s, and I get it. This game's a lot when you're trying to juggle everything. It can start to feel repetitive and lose its luster the further in you go. Because of this, it's hard to say exactly who I'd recommend the game to. I haven't enjoyed many modern RPGs more than this one, especially when it comes to combat design, but I still wouldn't say it's for everyone. If you're looking to play a character-driven RPG with a whimsical aesthetic style and simple yet engaging mechanics, this one's worth giving a try. Octopath Traveler does several crucial things better than a lot of other games out there, even critically acclaimed contemporaries. I question how much I really even like the RPG genre these days, but I don't think it's the genre that's the problem, and games like this prove that to me. I really like this game, and I hope going forward more RPGs put more focus on character-motivated goals and empowering interactivity. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, consider becoming a member of the channel to access various perks and support me and my videos. And feel free to let me know in the comments any games you'd be interested to hear my thoughts on. As always, be well everyone, and I'll see you next time.